I have interviewed thousands of people by now in journalism, television, radio, investigative work, recruitment, and HR. I have watched people explain themselves, defend themselves, reinvent themselves, and sometimes hide from themselves. You become very good at reading other people. You learn how to listen under the surface. You can hear when someone is saying the right words, but something underneath does not quite match. And then one day you realize you cannot explain yourself the old way anymore. After all those years of listening to other people's stories, my own story stopped making sense. Not because everything was wrong, but because the version of me who had been carrying that story had started to change. What happens when the role that made you feel capable, useful, driven, and clear does not feel like the whole truth anymore? I used to know exactly who I was when there was pressure. A live broadcast, a breaking news situation, a team depending on me, a problem that needed solving quickly. I knew that version of myself very well. Focused, driven, useful, and capable. And for a long time, I think I confused that with knowing who I was. I remember being called in late one night. There was a senator who had to be prepped before going on Larry King Live. In that kind of environment, you don't sit around wondering who you are. You just move. You get into action. You know what needs to happen. You know the stakes. It's live television. You know your role, and you become very good at being useful under pressure. So I rushed into the office. I had to be there before the guest arrived because it was late night and this was a last minute scheduling. In that situation, I knew my role. I was the producer. I was going to prep the senator. And when he came in, I knew exactly what to do. This was second nature to me. It's not like you sit down and you start thinking about, who am I? What am I doing? You just do. So I went in the studio, I set him up, and there was some technical difficulties. The feed wasn't patching in, and I had to do what I did best, work under pressure with live television. I got everything working when they cut to the senator. They had their segment, and it all went well, thankfully. That urgency made my life feel clear. Sometimes I miss that spark. There's a strange comfort in pressure. That kind of pressure gives you a role. When you have that role, you don't ask too many questions about who you are. I think a lot of high functioning people know this feeling. It's not always happiness and it's not always peace, but it's clarity. You're needed, you're useful, you know what to do next. When you're used to living like that, stillness can feel almost threatening. A few years later, I was in middle management and I had my own small technical team. At this time, I was recruiting people. And through that, I started working closely with HR at the company I was working at. And something in me became very interested in that part. Not just the formal process of human resources and recruiting, not just whether someone had the right experience, the right CV, but more the human part, the conversation, the moment where someone sits in front of you and tries to explain who they are, what they can do, where they're going, and why they should be trusted with this next step. I started realizing that I really liked the interview part of real people, not digging, but their experiences. I liked hearing people explain themselves. I liked seeing what was underneath or behind the CV, not just what they'd done, but who they might become in the right role. At that point, I think I was moving from producing stories to reading people in a completely different way than I was taught to or had experienced previously. Experiencing that part of recruiting people and talking to people in a different way and being involved in HR kind of lit something in me, sparked a genuine interest in people, not just as subjects to extract stories from or have the next plot line ready or what would make a good story. but mostly it sparked my curiosity about people and that part of a career. I thought I was just recruiting people, but really I was learning to recognize transition. I was watching people sometimes stand between who they had been and who they hoped they could become, and that gap in between. I probably didn't know it then, but that would become one of the central themes of my own life too. At some point, I decided to resign from a very high paying job without having another job lined up. Yeah, that might sound reckless, and maybe it was, but at the time I knew something very clearly. I couldn't stay inside that version of my life anymore. I didn't know exactly where I was going. I just knew I had to step out of that role. Here I was, unemployed, not knowing what I should do with my life. So I signed up with a temp agency in London where I lived at the time. I sent my CV in and I thought, oh well, they might call me in a week or two. They called me within 2 hours, called me in. I did some tests and I was interviewed myself. And then the next day I had a new job. I wasn't unemployed for very long, but identity-wise, something major had happened. Not just my salary that I pretty much cut in half, but the decision I had made to step out of a very impressive role with lots of responsibility and dare to step into the unknown. The first job I got as a temp was as a receptionist at a modeling agency. It might sound very flash, but to me, it just meant one thing: doing something else, trying to rediscover where my path was going to lead. And the strange thing was, I really liked it. I loved sitting there in the reception, carrying different responsibilities. And I liked not carrying the managerial responsibility, the salary talks, the rehab talks. Instead, I really liked talking to people simply because they were there. Not because I had to extract information from them, and not because I had to prepare them for something, and not because a broadcast was about to go live or because there was a crisis. Just people. That receptionist desk taught me something I didn't expect. I was still me without the title. I was still me without the pressure, and I was still me when nobody needed me to be impressive. That's important because I think many of us build an identity around being needed and being useful, maybe being impressive and being the one who can handle things. When that is removed, even temporarily, we wonder what is left. Sometimes what's left is not emptiness. Sometimes what's left is the beginning of something more honest. Looking back, I can see the pattern more clearly now. I was not just changing jobs. I was moving toward a different way of being with people, being with myself. Less performance, less adrenaline, less urgency, and more listening, more being in the present, more human contact without the constant pressure to produce something from it. I don't think I understood that at the time. I thought I was making practical decisions, but underneath it, I think something in me was already trying to move toward a different pace, a different relationship with work, and definitely not salary driven, but a different relationship with people and a different relationship with myself. After that receptionist job, I had a few other contracts and I got to try all kinds of different roles and markets, which was extremely exciting. The temp agency approached me and wanted to hire me as their in-house recruitment consultant. And that became the beginning of my recruitment and HR career. I worked with candidates, different industries, different kinds of people from all walks of life. And eventually I moved deeper into HR. And that is still part of who I am professionally today. I still work in HR, I still interview people, and I still like that part of work. Because after interviewing thousands of people, you start noticing something. People come with a CV, but they also come with a story. Sometimes the CV is really impressive, but the person seems exhausted. And sometimes the person has all the experience, but no longer believes in that direction. Someone might look perfect on paper, but it seems like they're quietly asking themselves, is this still me? And I can also notice that people in general are trying to sound very confident, including me, while they might actually be between chapters. And that old version of themselves or the old answer no longer rings true, and the new one has not yet arrived. A CV tells you what someone has done, but it doesn't always tell you who they are actually becoming. That is what I started to see in candidates, in colleagues, in people going through changes, and eventually in myself. And yes, I have a CV that looks very impressive on paper. Sometimes when I tell people what I've done, it almost sounds made up. Broadcast, TV, brushing shoulders with famous people, recruitment, HR. It sounds like two different lives, really. I'm the capable one, the driven one. I've done a lot. And for a long time, that gave me energy, motivation and ambition, high energy, like the next thing, the next role, the next challenge. But a CV can also become a kind of costume. It tells people what you've done, but it doesn't always tell you who you are now. And that is where I am today. I'm in this strange place where I can look back and see all these versions of myself, everything that I've done, all the roles, the producer, the manager, the interviewer, the HR person. I respect all of them. They built my life and they got me where I am today, but I'm not sure they can tell me where to go next. And I'm not saying that these roles don't matter, and I'm not ashamed of those parts of me either. I'm proud of what I've done, but I'm starting to realize that what once gave me identity cannot be the only thing that defines me now. And that is a strange place to be, because if you don't know where you're going or want to go, how are you supposed to steer yourself in the right direction? As of today, I even have another career possibility in front of me. A younger version of me might have thought, of course, this is the next thing. This is the next challenge. This is where the energy is. But now, to be honest, I don't know. I think I might stay where I am. And it's not because I have no ambition or because I've given up, but because I'm starting to question what kind of energy I want to build the next part of my life from. I used to think ambition meant moving fast, and now I'm wondering if ambition can also mean choosing peace. Maybe growth isn't always a leap. Maybe sometimes growth is staying steady enough to hear yourself again. Maybe it's choosing the slower and safer path, not out of fear, but because you're no longer willing to be driven only by adrenaline or new things, the new shiny object. And I think a younger version of me might have confused stability with weakness or being boring. But now I'm starting to see that choosing peace can also be quite powerful. Not every next chapter has to be built on urgency, and not every opportunity is meant to be chased. I think sometimes the mature choice isn't the most dramatic one. If this is landing somewhere real for you, I'd love for you to stay close to this work by subscribing. No pressure. I make these things slowly, but there will be more. And maybe you know this feeling too. Maybe you were once driven by pressure, by responsibility, by being needed. Maybe you built a whole identity around being capable, around being the one who could handle everything, around being the one who always found the next step. And now something in you is asking for a different kind of life. Not smaller and not less meaningful, just less driven by proving something. Maybe less driven by panic or performance or by the chase. If you think about it, a role can make you feel safe, and a title can make you feel clear, and pressure can make you feel powerful, but none of those things are the whole of who you are. If you're in that place, I don't think you're failing, and I don't think you're lazy or that you've lost the spark. Maybe the spark is changing. Maybe it's no longer wants to burn through that stress. Maybe it wants to become something steadier, something more stable. The visible story might be, I'm tired. And the deeper story might be, I've been overriding myself for years. Or the visible story might be, I need a new job. And the deeper story might be, I don't know who I am when I'm not performing. The visible story might be, I've lost my ambition. And the deeper story might be, I no longer want to be motivated by stress. Or the classic, I'm having a midlife crisis. While the deeper story might be, I'm finally telling myself the truth. And that is why I don't think this is always about falling apart. Sometimes it's about the old identity loosening its grip. Sometimes it's about the role becoming too small, or about realizing that the life that made sense before doesn't fully match the person you're becoming now. And that can be really uncomfortable. The old version of you wasn't useless. That person got you here, but maybe that person isn't the one who can carry you the whole next chapter. I really don't think losing the chase means losing yourself. Sometimes it means you're finally meeting the part of yourself that was underneath all those roles. The producer, the manager, the interviewer, the expert, the person who could always make things happen. Those parts of you mattered. They built your life and they got you here where you're at today, but they're not the whole story. And maybe midlife is the moment where you stop asking, what should I do next? And start asking, who do I want to be while I do it? And that question feels different to me now. It's slower. It's less impressive from the outside, maybe, perhaps, but it feels more honest. Maybe that's what I'm learning to trust. I'm not the producer of the story anymore. I'm actually inside it. For the first time in a long time, I'm not trying to make it sound impressive. I'm just trying to make it true. And maybe that's where becoming begins. Not with a perfect plan, not with a new title, not with another impressive role to step into, but with one honest question. Who do I want to be while I do it? Sit with that one. And if you want to, tell me in the comments, what part of your old identity are you no longer willing to chase? Is it the pressure? Is it the role, the title, the need to prove something? If you want support naming what is changing in you, I created a free identity shift guide. You'll find it in the description. I'll see you in the next conversation.